A man stood at the edge of his own collapse, staring into the mirror at the stranger he had become. Weak, reactive, controlled by his emotions, like a puppet on invisible strings. He realized in that moment that his greatest enemy was not the world, it was himself. And unless he destroyed that enemy, he would remain a slave forever. Before we dive in, what time are you listening?
At.
Where are you from? Drop a comment below and tell me, and please like and subscribe for more videos like this. He woke up one morning and made a decision that would change everything. No more excuses. No more weakness. No more being a slave to his own impulses. He sat on the edge of his bed, hands trembling, knowing that the person he was about to become would terrify the people who thought they knew him. The old version of himself had to die, and he would be the executioner. The first thing he did was cut off the noise. He deleted every app that fed his distraction, every connection that drained his energy without giving anything back. His phone became a tool, not a master. People texted him, called him, demanded his attention, but he did not respond. Not because he was angry, but because their voices no longer mattered in the construction of who he was building.
Silence became his first weapon.
His friends noticed first. They asked why he was being distant, why he was not showing up to gatherings anymore, why he seemed cold. He did not explain himself. Explanation was a form of seeking approval, and approval was a chain he was breaking. They called him arrogant, selfish, changed, but their words bounced off him like rain off stone. He had learned that people fear what they cannot control, and he was becoming uncontrollable. He began waking up at 4 in the morning, not because some guru told him to, but because he wanted to own the hours when the world was still asleep. The darkness became his ally. In those silent hours, he trained his body until it screamed for mercy, and then he pushed further. Pain became information, not suffering. Each drop of sweat was evidence that he was killing his old self one rep at a time. Every morning, he looked at himself in the mirror and asked one question. Are you stronger than yesterday? If the answer was no, he punished himself with more work, more repetition, more discipline. He stopped eating for pleasure and started eating for fuel. Sugar, comfort food, anything that made him feel good without earning it, he removed from his life completely. His body became a temple, and he was the strictest priest it had ever known. His coworkers began to notice the change, stopped complaining about workload, stopped gossiping during breaks, stopped participating in the endless cycle of excuses and mediocrity. When someone tried to pull him into drama, he responded with silence or a single cold sentence that ended the conversation. They started avoiding him, whispering that he had become strange, robotic, inhuman. But he knew the truth. He had not become less human. He had become more disciplined than they could comprehend. But he did not care what they thought. Comfort was built on shared weakness, and he was no longer part of that tribe. He arrived early, left late, and did his work with a precision that made others uncomfortable. His boss, who once dismissed him, now watched him carefully, unsure whether to promote him or fear him. Power recognizes power, and weakness recognizes its own extinction. At home, he eliminated everything that did not serve his transformation. The television went first, then the comfortable furniture that encouraged laziness. He kept only what was necessary. His apartment became a monastery of discipline, bare and cold, a place where comfort had no power. He slept on a thin mattress on the floor, not out of poverty, but out of principle. Softness was the enemy of strength, and he was at war. He stopped seeking validation from anyone. When people praised him, he did not smile or thank them excessively. When they criticized him, he did not defend himself or feel the need to prove them wrong. Both praise and criticism were just noise, distractions from the mission. He became a wall that nothing could penetrate. Opinions became irrelevant when you stopped living for the approval of others. Months passed, and the people who once knew him started to feel uneasy around him. He no longer laughed at their jokes, no longer shared his problems, no longer needed their company. He had become self-sufficient in a way that made them question their own dependencies. They called him cold, said he had lost his humanity. But what they really meant was that he had stopped playing the game they needed him to play. His family confronted him during a gathering, asking why he had become so distant, so emotionless, so hard. His mother looked at him with concern, his father with confusion. They wanted the old version of him back, the one who sought their approval, who needed their guidance. He looked at them calmly and said nothing. Silence was his answer, and it unsettled them more than any words could. He loved them, but he would not sacrifice his transformation for their comfort. He realized something profound in that moment. Most people do not want you to be strong. They want you to be strong enough to help them, but weak enough to need them. It's true strength, the kind that requires no one. That kind terrifies people. It reminds them of their own chains, their own excuses, their own failures. His discipline was a mirror that showed them what they refused to see in themselves. He cut ties with the woman who once held his heart. She had been his weakness, the one person who could manipulate him with tears, with affection, with the promise of love. But he saw clearly now that what he called love was just dependency wearing a beautiful mask. When she cried and begged him to stay, he felt nothing, not because he was cruel, but because he had killed the part of him that could be controlled by emotion. She told him he had changed, that he was not the man she fell in love with. She was right. That man was dead. He had killed him deliberately, suffocated him under layers of discipline and cold logic. The new man did not need her validation, did not need her comfort, did not need anything from her. Left, and he did not chase her. That was the moment he knew the transformation was complete. People started to fear him, not because he was violent or aggressive, but because he was unmovable. In meetings, he did not react to provocations. Arguments, he did not raise his voice or lose composure. He simply stated facts, made decisions, and moved forward. When others tried to guilt him, manipulate him, or pressure him, they hit a wall of ice. Nothing worked anymore. He'd become immune to the tactics that controlled weaker men. His discipline became legendary in his circle. People talked about how he never missed a workout, never broke a promise to himself, never indulged in anything that weakened him. Some admired him from a distance, others resented him deeply. But no one could ignore him. He had become a force, and forces do not ask for permission. They simply exist, undeniable and absolute. One day, a former friend confronted him angrily, accusing him of thinking he was better than everyone else. The man looked at him without emotion and replied calmly, "I do not think I am better than you. I simply refuse to be worse than I can be." The friend had no response. The truth was a blade that cut too deep. Some people cannot handle the mirror you hold up to them. He stopped consuming content that fed his mind with weakness. No more scrolling through endless feeds of people pretending to be happy, no more watching others live while he sat still. He read only books that sharpened his mind, listened only to ideas that built his philosophy. Everything else was poison, and he had developed immunity. His mind became a fortress that only valuable thoughts could enter. His body transformed into something unrecognizable, lean, hard, functional. Every muscle had a purpose. Every movement was controlled. He did not train for aesthetics. He trained for power, for endurance, for the ability to endure what others could not. Pain became his companion, and he welcomed it like an old friend. Where others saw suffering, he saw opportunity to grow stronger. But the most terrifying change was not physical. It was mental. He had rewired his brain to eliminate hesitation, doubt, and fear. When a decision needed to be made, he made it instantly, without the paralysis of overthinking. When action was required, he moved without delay. He had become a machine that ran on logic, discipline, and unshakable will. Emotion no longer clouded his judgment. He developed routines that would break ordinary men. Every single day, without exception, he followed the same iron schedule. Wake at 4, train until 6, cold shower, work without distraction, read for 2 hours, sleep at 9. There were no cheat days, no breaks, no moments of weakness. The routine was not a prison. It was his liberation from the chaos of undisciplined life. People whispered that he had lost his soul, that he had become heartless. But he knew the truth. He had not lost his soul. He had freed it from the prison of weakness, emotion, and dependency. What they called heartless, he called liberated. What they called extreme, he called necessary. The gap between who he was and who they were grew wider every day. He stopped explaining his choices to anyone. When people asked why he lived the way he did, he simply smiled and said nothing. Explanation implied that he needed their understanding, their approval, their agreement. He needed none of these things. His life was his own, and he answered to no one but the version of himself he was building. He started keeping a journal, not of feelings, but of victories. Every day he wrote down what he conquered: the urge to sleep in, the craving for comfort, the voice that told him to quit. He documented every battle against himself, and every win reinforced his identity as someone who could not be broken. The journal became proof that he was not the same person anymore. His social circle shrank to almost nothing. The few people who remained were those who respected strength, who understood that his silence was not rejection, but focus. They did not try to change him or pull him back. They watched from a distance, sometimes inspired, sometimes intimidated. He preferred it that way. Quality over quantity, even in relationships. He noticed something interesting about power. The less he spoke, the more people listened when he did. The less he reacted, the more his calm presence dominated a room. The less he needed, the more valuable he became. Scarcity creates value, and he had made himself scarce in every way that mattered. His financial situation began to change as well. With discipline in one area came discipline in all areas. He stopped spending on things that did not matter. Every purchase was calculated, every expense justified. Money that once vanished on temporary pleasures now accumulated. He was building not just a strong body and mind, but a strong foundation for his future. He took on challenges that others avoided, difficult projects at work, complex problems that required deep focus, situations that scared away comfortable people. He did not do this to prove anything to anyone. He did it because challenges were the forge where his new self was hammered into shape. Easy choices create weak men. Hard choices create strong ones. There were moments of temptation. Nights when the old cravings surfaced. Days when loneliness whispered that maybe he had gone too far. But he recognized these voices for what they were, the death rattle of his former self. He did not fight these feelings, simply observed them, acknowledged them, and let them pass like clouds across an empty sky. He learned that discipline was not about never feeling weak. It was about never acting on weakness. The urges would always come, but action was a choice, and he had become a master of choosing strength over comfort, logic over emotion, long-term power over short-term pleasure. Years passed, and the man who once stood broken in front of a mirror was gone forever. In his place stood someone new, someone who did not need approval, did not fear loneliness, did not bend to pressure. He had become sovereign, a king in his own right, ruling over the only kingdom that mattered, himself. Every decision he made reinforced his power. Every action built his empire of one. He walked through life now with a calmness that unnerved people. He could not read him, could not predict him, could not control him. He had become the most dangerous kind of person, one who had nothing to lose because he had already sacrificed everything weak inside himself. He was alone, but he was free, feared, but untouchable. And in that cold, disciplined existence, he found something most people would never know: true power. Not the power that comes from controlling others, but the power that comes from complete control over yourself. He had become his own master, his own judge, his own authority. No external force could move him because he had built himself on foundations of iron discipline. The world could throw anything at him, and he would remain standing, unmoved, unshaken, undefeated. He understood now what ancient philosophers meant when they spoke of sovereignty. It was not about ruling nations or commanding armies. It was about conquering the only territory that truly mattered, the space between your ears. He had won that war, and in winning it, he had become free in a way most people would never experience. The old him would have sought approval for this transformation. The new him did not care if anyone understood. He had become the kind of man who makes others uncomfortable simply by existing, because his presence reminds them of their own potential, their own excuses, their own surrender to mediocrity. He was living proof that transformation is possible. Weakness can be destroyed. That discipline is the ultimate form of freedom. So if you like this video, please like and subscribe for more videos like this.